Do you consider yourself a high achiever? Smart, driven, highly successful? I am so excited to have you. My name is Julia Arndt and I'm the host of the Stress Podcast. I will help you develop your stress resilience the same way you've developed your workplace superpowers. Learn peak performance tools to thrive at work and in your personal life. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome back to the Stress Podcast. I'm super excited to welcome our new guest to the show, and it's Jennifer Chapman. Hi, Jennifer. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. Excited to be here.
Yes, I'm super excited that you're here as well. Tell us a little bit about where you're currently located, what time zone it is, and what you've been up to this morning.
All right. So I live in Indianapolis, Indiana, in the United States. And it is 1:30 Eastern time here in the afternoon. And today I just had a chuckle at myself because I've broken all the rules today of how to be most effective with how you use your time. Mm-hmm. And I had blacked out a big chunk of time to work on one project and I let it get taken over by a few little things here and there. So I just wanted to throw that out there that even us experts don't always practice perfectly what we preach.
Yeah, that's very true. I can totally relate to that as well. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. Who are you and what are you up to these days?
So I am, like we said, Jennifer Chapman, and I am an executive leadership coach. Actually, I like working with all levels from new frontline supervisors all the way up to senior vice presidents and the C-suite. I've been coaching for about 13, 14 years, and I love it. Before that, I did learning and development and leadership development programs. But once I discovered coaching and just the working with people one-on-one, tailoring the things just to exactly what people need, and then seeing the impact of having that one-on-one support, I've really just focused my business and my energy right there. And I'm also a mom and a wife, and we have a blended family. So I've got 3 stepchildren who are tweens and teens. Mm-hmm. And then I've got 2 biological children who are 4 and 6, and we have a Rottweiler named Gus. So
wow, big family,
have a very full life, and so it's just always. I think people ask me sometimes, can you have it all? And my answer is yes, but you'll never have it all in all the areas at the same time. And mm-hmm. So there are different weeks where I feel like I'm rocking it with work, but then maybe we're eating out every day. And, I feel like you just have to rotate it, and mm-hmm. you're always doing really well in some areas. And then it's not the right time for some of the other things that are taking a back burner, and you just kind of rotate through.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Coaching for 13 to 14 years, that's a long time. I feel like that's almost before, I guess, coaching was even kind of a thing, right?
It was getting to be a pretty established thing right around the time I got in. And then you're right, since then, it's really taken off as mm-hmm. people have seen the value of it transforming lives. And, mm-hmm. We go to training classes and it might be nice, a break from everything else, and we might pick up a nugget or two. But then to take that and apply it consistently is really challenging. And actually, we can talk about this more later, but I have a free giveaway for your podcast audience. Mm-hmm. If they text 411321, text the word accelerate. I actually have an article that I'd love to send out that talks about how to get the most out of a training class. So it's not just I went or I read a book and then now what do I do? But I do like how coaching focuses on translating the knowledge into a behavior change, and to see my clients progress in ways they never thought they could.
Yeah, for sure. And you have a really wonderful slide here in the background, as I'm just going to point it out. So for people that are watching, there's also an international number that you can text to if you want to get that Accelerate article. So thank you so much already for sharing this. This is really awesome. So tell us a little bit more about what you focus on with leadership, what leadership coaching, like what are the areas and what are the topics that you usually talk about with your clients?
One thing I've been talking to a lot of people about is feelings of overwhelm and burnout.
Mm-hmm.
I think consistently it's been a really tough year and a half plus. And for a long time, we were able to just hang in there, but not ever really knowing when it was going to stop. And I think we've all been unpleasantly surprised by how long it's been, and we're still not sure what's happening and how much longer these conditions are going to last and so forth. So I have worked with my clients to help them figure out how to adjust their perspective so it's more short term and not as long term. You can be more flexible and pivot more. And that's been a popular topic. Another thing that I work with a lot is I love working with really intelligent people who got promoted because of their technical expertise, but never really got a lot of guidance on how to do the leading and managing side of their job. So for people who are like, find themselves, okay, suddenly I'm a senior manager in this organization and I'm not really sure how I got here. And I wish I were back doing the technical job that I love, like an engineer or a scientist or financial experts. How can you still hold on to the parts that you really love? And then how can you also learn how to deal with difficult conversations or working with people with really different personalities than you have, or how to be more decisive, just a lot of those basic leadership qualities that can help make people's workday a lot easier and in turn make people happier at work.
Yeah, I'm actually really curious. Do you feel like, because you mentioned burnout, and obviously we talk a lot about stress and burnout on this podcast, do you feel like it's been something that you've seen evolve over those 13 years that you've been coaching? Is that something that comes up more and more? Or would you say even 13 years ago, people felt stressed out and needed some guidance around how to avoid or overcome burnout?
So in my experience, from 13 years ago until about 2 years ago, it was pretty level, pretty consistent over that period of time. And then of course, when the pandemic hit in early 2020, then it became exponential. And I've done a lot of research and listening to different experts talk about from a psychological perspective and an emotional level, what's going on. And they're equating the conditions we've been in to trauma. And we think of trauma being more like, a severe injury or an abusive situation, the big things. But actually, when you look at everything that's happened as far as, from having lockdowns and no contact with other people for prolonged periods of time, we've got children who don't even remember what it was like to not wear a mask, and which impacts how we interact with other people and how we self-identify. And as I've looked at it that way, as this is a type of trauma, then I've helped my clients to be a lot more patient with themselves and with others, just recognizing we're really are in unprecedented times. We don't know what the future looks like, and it's okay, because none of us.
Nobody knows. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, for sure. It's so interesting when you talk about it, because I feel the same way. Like when we were, hitting the first stay-at-home order in March 2020, and people would talk about, going back to the office only in January 2021, I was thinking to myself, this is like, they're just kind of making everything super dramatic, and it's impossible that we're all going to work from home and be in this kind of situation for so long. And now it's the end of 2021 and many people are still not fully back in the office. I think, companies are starting to get there, and I talk to more people that are actually sitting back in the office, but it's still, we're still kind of in this weird spot. And I actually, just before jumping onto the podcast, I talked to my mom in Germany, and I'm going home to Germany for the first time in 2.5 years in December. Because of the pandemic, usually I go home once a year. And she was like, I really hope everything is going to go well. And Germany is starting to be super restrictive again and super strict with everything around Corona, and the numbers are going up. And I'm just like, oh, it's just such a crazy world. And it's important to just stay grounded and take care of yourself during these times, and not get, I think, too stressed or frazzled with all the information that you receive.
Absolutely. And one thing I help my clients with, not just related to the pandemic, but just in their workplace in general, is to be really clear about what's in your control, what do you own, and what is out of your control. So much of like whether or not you can go home to Germany, which I really hope you can, that is so much out of your control. And then sometimes at work, we stress out about some of our underperformers, for example, and you've got a responsibility for what your team is producing, and yet you can't make somebody be a high performer. You can't make somebody produce quality work. So just being really clear about, okay, this part is in my control, this I can do, and then everything else I've got to let go. I've got to find another way to deal with it because I don't have a magic wand.
I think that's actually a really interesting topic. Can we dive deeper into that? What can a manager or a leader do when they are having underperforming employees, and they're getting stressed by it because they maybe tend to micromanage or try to control it all and maybe take on some of the work and obviously burn out with that? Like what are the tips that you would give a person?
So first of all, I would check what your definition is of a poor performer. And one thing that's happening right now in the workplace is we have actually 5 generations in the workplace right now. And that's crazy. So you think about over time, we talk about the traditionalists, and then the baby boomers, Gen X, the millennials, or Gen Y. And now we've got the Gen Next or Gen Z into the workforce. And what I've seen with that generation in particular, and also with a lot of the millennials, is that they have a really strong need and value for a work-life balance, more so than any other previous generation. So there are some who are in like one of the older generations who look at these younger 2 generations saying, oh, well, they don't really care about their work, and they're always, they come in late, they leave in early, or they're always taking their vacation time, and just recognize that doesn't necessarily mean they're a poor performer. It just means they have a different value around the hours they work than you do. And for example, money might not be a very strong motivator for some of these. They'd much rather have the time off, for example. So check your assumptions and start there. The second thing is, let's talk now about the really poor performers, the ones who just are not a good fit in their job, and you wonder, how did you get this job and why are you still in it? And in those cases, I have found the easiest thing to do is to find out what motivates that person, and you've got to just make things in terms of what's in it for them. If you want to get them on board, if you want to get their buy-in, then put it in terms of how it's going to benefit them. And you might think, well, that's dumb. They should just want to do what's the best for the organization, or this is their job. And you can choose to keep that perspective, but that perspective is not going to result in any change. So if you want to see what can I do to leverage whatever I can out of this one person, then you've got to think about what's in it for them. And then the other thing I would recommend, I've had a couple of clients in this last year who had poor performers who were just sucking all the time. And one of them, after we'd met a few times, one of my coaching clients, I said, do you realize how much in our sessions we talk about so-and-so? And she's like, oh yeah, well, he drives you crazy, but it's not that big of a deal. So I asked her for the next 2 weeks to write down, keep a log of every time she directly talked to this person, emailed, got interrupted by an IM, the person texted, or that she just was thinking and stewing about this person. And she came back to me the next session and she said, I am spending about 48 to 50% of my time on this one person. And she's like, all right, I need boundaries and this can't continue. And that's the other thing to do is you just need to have boundaries. And you go to this person who keeps interrupting and, okay, we have a one-on-one scheduled once a week. I need you to keep your questions until then, or some kind of a strategy where they do not have permission to constantly be inserting themselves into your life. You've got to have a really strong boundary and communicate it to that person so you can have some mental balance and actually be spending time on things you enjoy, or that you're going to get more of a return on your investment.
I think, that totally resonates with me. I think a lot of people are probably struggling most with the communication part, I would assume, right? I think maybe first the awareness that they're even spending so much time, so such a good exercise. And then probably the fact of like being afraid to have that conversation, right? Do you have any tips on how to communicate? I mean, you already said like, okay, we need to set a boundary and only talk like during the one-on-ones, like collect your questions. But what if you are a person that's, I feel like we are all in a way people pleasers and we want to be nice with people, or, like I'm thinking about all of the tech companies that I work with, Google, Facebook, and they, they have like these peer reviews and these performance feedback. So if they are, it almost comes always back to them if they're not nice to a person, because then it's like, oh, it's going to be written down in this like internal tool. Any thoughts or insights on that?
Yes. So one perspective you want to keep is by saying no to something, you're saying yes to something else. So when you feel that fear come up, then ask yourself, what is the cost of me continuing with the way things are going now? Is that going to get me the results I want? Is that going to get me the promotion I want? Is that going to get me the work-life balance I want? And usually the answer is no to that. And if you can keep that in mind, then it makes it easier to ignore that people pleasing for that person, because pleasing you, pleasing your partner, pleasing your kids, pleasing your friends, that's got to be important too. Pleasing your boss, pleasing stakeholders. So just reframe it to, okay, I'm not going to worry about pleasing this one person because I'm going to focus on pleasing all these other people over here. And then as far as communication goes, what I would recommend when you're noticing behaviors that aren't effective for you or for your team, then be curious. Come from a place of curiosity rather than judgment at first. And then you might want to ask questions of, I've noticed that you've come late to the last 3 meetings, not you're always late to meetings. Use data, be specific, and say, is there something that's getting in the way of you coming on time to the meetings? Or I've noticed that the last 2 reports that you've sent in have had a lot of spelling and grammatical errors. Can you tell me just a little bit more about what's been going on with those reports and the deadlines? And just give them a chance, because there sometimes could be something that you aren't aware of that would change the light on the situation. And then once you are confident that you have an understanding of what is going on with the person, be clear on expectations and the process for how you want things to go. So for example, if somebody's got a lot of errors in reports, then maybe send them a coworker and have them review each other's work products. And notice I said each other's, because 2 things will happen. One, the person who's stronger is going to catch the mistakes of the person who's a poor performer. But then by reading the other person's work, the poor performer is going to get a better sense of what you mean by a good work.
What like level to get to. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just think about ways that you can delegate. So you're not the one who's pulling the all-nighters, always correcting what this poor performer did. And then, you can help the person see the consequences and the cause and effect. And especially if it's somebody in a younger generation and they really value their work-life balance, help them understand that once you can get this process down, once you can get this report to where it needs to be, you're going to be able to do it faster. But until that happens, I need you to stay until it gets done because it's due, and these are the people we're accountable to.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just think about it in terms of data and facts, this isn't personal, this is about you getting the work done, mm-hmm. then it's, in my opinion, a lot easier to have those tough conversations.
Mm-hmm. And would you as a leader say to the person, hey, I'm spending a lot of time on you at the moment? Like, would you go that deep into that kind of detail to showcase, hey, I've actually been, spending, I don't know, 5 hours per week on reviewing your material? Or do you feel like that would be too vulnerable to share?
I would say it would depend on the circumstance. So there are times where I think that would be completely appropriate, mm-hmm. or you could also be a little bit more general. Like I've noticed as I'm managing this team of 8 people that I am not able to be as responsive to the whole team because of the interruptions that I'm getting from you throughout the day. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Let's try saving all of your questions to this particular time. Or I had one client who she would get multiple emails throughout the day with questions and just weird things from this one person. And so she said, open up an email to me at the beginning of the day, put all these things that you think of to communicate throughout the day, and then when you stop working for the day, then you can send me the email. Mm-hmm. And so then she went from getting 10 emails a day from this person to just nice. Getting one. And mm-hmm. and don't get me wrong, she would have to remind this person, and sometimes she had to do that tough love where she'd get that random 2 emails in the middle of the day, and she would just send a reply back saying, please put this on your daily email, or please save this for our one-on-ones. And she wouldn't respond. And that's the thing. You cannot give in to what this person wants, because it's like that little kid who's clamoring for attention. And then you just say, oh, here's a cookie. And then they learn, oh, exactly. I make a stink, I can have a cookie. So yeah. You really, once you make a boundary, you absolutely have to hold to it.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's what I always say as well, firm boundaries and being ruthless, especially at the start, because if people learn that you will respond, they will keep reaching out as well. I'm curious as well. So what if, maybe the leader identifies that person being burnt out and stressed out, so that's kind of maybe a reason for underperforming. How do you help your leaders manage employees' well-being? Especially when even the person might not be aware that they're burnt out, because I think sometimes, especially from an external perspective, it's sometimes easier to see than the person that's in it.
Yes. So if you have somebody who in the past has been a high performer whose work has been more sporadic or not, not as consistent in quality, that's a great time to just have that curiosity conversation. And one line I love, or a sentence opener I really love, is I've noticed, and then base what you're going to say on observable things. So for example, hey, Julia, I've noticed that you've seemed tired lately. Are you getting enough sleep? Is everything okay? Mm-hmm. Or I've noticed that you've been a little bit late with the last couple of deliverables. Is everything okay? And so that gives you a chance to then point out specifically what you're observing, and then giving that person a chance to reflect on it and then answer. And, I was just talking recently to someone who is very much a high performer who got diagnosed with a degenerative disease recently, and not a lot of people know. And, it's not like you want everybody to spill their guts out to you, but isn't that a situation that if you knew a little bit more about what was going on, you'd be a lot more, how can I support you, exactly, rather than being critical of what you're seeing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's always the transparency of what's actually going on, right? Which is sometimes hard in the workplace. I think a lot of people struggle with that transparency because they think it will negatively reflect again on their performance, which it kind of already does. But then I guess when you open up about it, I think there's still this underlying fear that, the performance might suffer, or your manager might say, okay, take a week or 2 weeks off, but then you might be afraid that your performance evaluation might reflect that poorly as well.
So I'm going to tell a story about performance reviews
Yes.
because it was life-changing for me. So back in the day, this was back in 2008. I was working full-time for a large consulting firm. So we had the expectation of doing, X number of billable hours for the week. On top of that, we had so many hours we had to do on proposal writing, business development. We also had teams of people to manage, make sure they're billable. We're in charge of their professional development, writing up their performance, and all of that. And it was a lot. And somewhere in there, I had discovered coaching, worked with some coaches on another project, and decided, oh my gosh, I finally know what I want to be when I grow up. And so I decided to go to Georgetown's leadership coaching program. And I didn't think about it at the time. In hindsight, I could have dropped down to like a 75% employee. I would have taken a salary cut, but I didn't. And I go through these periods where I think I'm invincible. So I
We all do.
went ahead. Oh yeah. I signed up for this really intensive program, and the program, we had homework and stuff to do all the time, but then once a month we'd have 3 days, attendance mandatory. And it was like all day, all evening. And I'm an extrovert. I love being around people. And I was exhausted at the end of each of these days. So just 3 completely consuming days in a row. And the eve of one of these 3 days straight, I was asked by my boss to lead a proposal that was due at the beginning of the following week. There was no way I could do it. No way. And also do this coaching program. And so as I realized that, and I have a really hard time saying no, I said, I am not available these next 3 days by phone. I mean, email, it was like electronics off. And I said, but I know somebody who I think would do a great job, and I'd be happy to mentor that person behind the scenes. And they said, great. So I got that all connected. I did some mentoring behind the scenes. And I thought it all went well. I was really proud of myself for having a boundary and so on. Well, 6 months later, it was my performance review. And as I was going through the written evaluation, guess what? There was a line in there about how I didn't have my priorities straight, that I had said no to a very high up person in this business, and I knew exactly what they were talking about. I was so angry. And it did result in a lower rating than I normally got on my performance evaluations. And it really bothered me for like a week. And then I was talking to a friend of mine, and my friend was so wise, and she asked me, if you could do it over again, would you do it any differently? And I thought about it, and I said no, because my priority was I wanted to become a coach, and becoming a coach, I needed to be in this program. And once I thought about it that way, it just totally changed my view on the experience. And I thought, well, good for me for holding my boundary to what I really wanted. And if it meant getting a slightly lower score on my performance evaluation, it was worth it. And I think we just put way too much of our self-worth into those performance appraisals. And I would like to just challenge all of you listening that what are your success measures? What is it you want to get out of your job? What's your plan in a year? What's your plan in 5 years? And is your job helping you get there? And if they're not, you know what? It's okay to say no to this thing over here, because you want this thing over there eventually. And I have zero regrets now. How many years later, nobody asks me, how did my performance evaluation go in 2008?
Yeah,
They're like,
exactly.
wow, you're a fantastic coach and people want to work with me. And,
Yeah,
I don't even care. But
yeah,
at the time, it felt like so much. And I understand that. But really, it's about, what do you want success to look like, and letting go of what other people want from you and expect from you.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you're speaking from my heart. I think I know so many people, I mean, me included at the time when I was an employee, that would put so much weight into performance evaluations and would feel so down if the performance evaluation wouldn't reflect what I was hoping for, right? And I have these conversations, same now with my clients, right? And I can kind of chuckle about it because I'm like, like nobody asks me anymore about this, but I understand how important it is for the person in the moment. um it's sad almost. I feel like how much self-worth is tied to that. And I constantly talk about it with friends as well, and they know that they would even say, Jules, I know it's stupid, and I know I shouldn't be down about it, but it took me 2 or 3 weeks to get over this. And I think yeah, there's really not a I really love the things that you said, but I think there's really not a perfect solution for people to take these things a little lighter, right? Because at the end of the day, that's how they get recognition and reward for the work that they're doing. And I actually think as well that the more sometimes I see, even when people struggle or they're not really fully connected to their work, and then they also get a like lower performance evaluation, then that's even worse, because I feel like, then it's like you have a bad, like you are not really enjoying what you're doing, and then you also get a bad performance evaluation. And I feel like it just exacerbates like the whole situation. Do you have any other thoughts on self-worth and like maybe disconnecting yourself from those performance insights and evaluations?
Yeah, I worked with a client a few months ago who, she felt like she didn't really know what was expected of her. It was a newer team in her organization, and I think they'd done like a reorg, and she was then the leader of it. And she had a very hands-off supervisor, and she just really struggled with, am I doing a good job? Am I not? And I said, okay, if you don't have clear expectations from your supervisor, then that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
You decide, what do you want your success metrics to be? What do you
Mm-hmm.
want your job to entail? So we went through an exercise of her bulleting out what she perceived her job duties to be, and then created some measurable goals of things that she wanted to work on and accomplish with her team over that next 6 months and then a year mark. And
Mm-hmm.
then she took that to this hands-off supervisor and said, this is what I'm understanding and wanting my role to be, and what do you think? And the supervisor loved what she had put together, made some tweaks, but it was so empowering to watch my client go from,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I should be doing, to, hey, this is what I want to do, this is what I can do. And the supervisor was completely on board. Now, some of you might say, well, my supervisor wouldn't be on board. And so then my answer to that is, it doesn't matter. So if you really want to get clear about what you want to be accomplishing and what success looks like, set some time aside and sit down and write your own goals. I'll
Mm-hmm.
know I'm successful if I've done X, Y, and Z in this amount of time. This is how I know, this is what success looks like, how I know I'm going to be successful. If your supervisor's on board, fantastic. If your supervisor's not, this is a great chance to not care about your performance review.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, I'm not saying don't do your job. Obviously, that's non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Unless you decide to look for a different job.
Mm-hmm.
But if you decide to put more time and energy in other areas because it's going to get you where you want to go, then that's what you should be focusing on. And so it goes back to what I said earlier. When you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else. And when you say yes to something you really want, you're going to have to say no to some other things. So if you're struggling with that sense of value and self-worth, it's not a matter of how do I help my organization see it? It really is getting internal, and what is it you're wanting, and how can you know that you're accomplishing what you want to, because that's where your self-regard is going to come from.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I want to go back to the very first thing you said, because I feel like it ties really well into wrapping up our podcast interview today. But you said you had a day and it was not as structured as you wanted it to be. How do you usually structure your day, right? As an entrepreneur and working from home, how do you structure your day? What is kind of your best case scenario, I guess? And then how do you, I guess, evaluate yourself to being like, oh, today was just kind of all over the place? And how do you kind of find kind of yourself back on track when you are falling off the good intentions?
Great question. So one practice I've tried to put in place, this came from a coach I worked with who, interestingly enough, was not a very religious person, but he knew that I am. And so he challenged me to start my work day with a prayer and just to commune with God or whatever higher power you believe in, or the universe, and just kind of put out there, this is what I want to accomplish, and help me know what from my knowledge and my experience and my resources that I can leverage to help these things happen. And I find just sitting down and having some quiet time and putting out that intentionality really centers me before I dive in and get pulled into different directions. And then one thing that works well for me, it might not work well for everybody, is I love having my calendar. So I block out times for things. So I'll have, of course, meetings. I have my sessions with clients, and then I block out time for, like today, I was working on an analysis and a report for another client, and I kept putting it off. And I'll be honest, I don't enjoy doing that as much as I love the one-on-one coaching. So then I actually blocked out time on the calendar. And then I did have a couple of urgent things come up where people needed me to look at something, or I needed to get a contract out to somebody. And so then I blocked out those amounts of times. And sometimes for me, I'll just say, you know what, I could spend an hour doing this, but I only have a half hour. So I'm going to do a half hour, and it's going to just be good enough. And I really try to stick to the amounts of time that I've allocated for the different things. I also generally try to give myself 15 minutes between each of my meetings or things that I'm working on. And that way I always have some wiggle room if a coaching session goes over, if our podcast lasts a little bit longer, and then I'm not stressed all day thinking I'm late to every meeting.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think it is easier to manage that time when you are self-employed than when you are in an organization. I always think I wish it would be so much more flexible in a way in organizations as well. But yeah, there it was funny, we were talking about that yesterday. I did a time management class with a company or with a team, and we were talking about this new study that Microsoft Labs came out with, that you should have 10 minutes in between meetings to completely disconnect in order to like keep the stress levels low. And I said, well, we all know we can't have a 10 to 10:30 meeting and then a 10:40 to 11:10 meeting, because that's just not how the whole company works, right? And when you have like thousands of employees, the calendar is just not designed that way. But there's always other ways on how you can still make it work, right? You can make it a 20-minute meeting or a 25-minute meeting, and then have those 5 minutes at the end when you're going into the meeting with an agenda and an intention of what the outcome should be like. And yeah, I just think that we need to really be open to new things, and be open to try out things, instead of always just finding reasons why things are actually not working out and are difficult.
Absolutely. And one thing that I recommend, if you are with an organization and you don't have necessarily a lot of control over when meetings happen, is I would still say absolutely block at a minimum time to eat lunch. And I know some organizations, like where my husband works, like nobody works between noon and 1 p.m. I'd say for me, that feels a little unusual. And a lot of times it's just your lunch happens whenever it happens. But block out, even if it's just half an hour, that you can take care of yourself and take a bio break, make sure you're getting some food and have a chance to just, and then if you're doing back-to-back meetings, rather than doing like 4 hours of back-to-back meetings, then block out, maybe there's a mid-morning 15-minute break you can block in for yourself. And that way, if people are looking at availability on your calendar, then they might have to adjust that. So do you have complete control? No. But are there tricks that you can do to still have that mental balance and a chance to just breathe? Absolutely. Because let's be honest, if you're in back-to-back meetings all day, how much good are you going to be for that 3 to 4 and 4 to 5 o'clock meeting? You're going to be pretty worthless by then. So it really is, again, when you feel guilt, like, oh, but I've got to be available, you've got to reframe it to, am I going to be able to provide my best value by going go, 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 go all the day? Or if I put in some breaks for myself, will I be able to provide the better value? And then it makes it easier to make that time for ourselves.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that. Yeah. Guilt is something that I always get a question around too, where people are like, I always feel guilty. And I'm like, we all always feel guilty, but that's also just a human emotion. And sometimes you just have to sit with it and still be in that discomfort and tell yourself, well, this feels like I feel guilty right now, but I know in the long scheme of things, this is a better decision for myself, you know? And I feel like once you have kind of that positive feedback from just your own physical, right, performance or my mental performance, to be like, I actually feel a lot better now that I took it, then it's going to be easier in the future to repeat that pattern as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What do you do in the mornings or evenings to like maybe disconnect from work or start work? Like, do you have any routines that you really enjoy doing that help you to be your best self?
I like actually in the middle of the day, my husband works from home on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So on those days I block out time so we can eat lunch together. And that's really nice because we can connect about how his day's going, how my day's going. I can vent if I need to or be excited about something. That's really important to me. And then I have a firm end of the day deadline based on when my kids get home from school. And that's a big value to me and helps me with my sometimes guilt about being a working mom is, well, I then can be 100% present for them at the end or the end of my work day and the kind of beginning of their home time. And, you know, and I don't always recognize how important it is for them, but my son had come home about a week ago and I worked late that day and my husband was also working from home and he walked in the door and he's like, hey, who's going to welcome me home? And I'm like, oh, I love that. And just reinforce that there's this importance. So that's very motivating me for me to have an absolute end to my workday so I can change to another hat.
Yeah, that's really nice. Nice. Well, Jennifer, this was such an interesting conversation. Thank you so much for all the insights that you shared with us today. How can people learn more about you?
Well, I would love for you to text 411-321. You're going to text the word accelerate, ACCELERATE, and that will give you a chance to then communicate with me, and I'll send you a Leadership Power Tools article that is focused on how to get the most out of the trainings you go to, those leadership books you're reading, the podcasts you're listening to, so that it isn't just, oh, that was nice and you forget about it, but that it can be something that you really apply. So I'd love for you to text that 411-321, the word accelerate, and that's going to be a great way for us to connect.
Great. Sounds great. Well, thank you so much again. It was a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and I wish you all the best for the future.
Oh, and you too. And I will really be thinking about you and hoping that you get to go see your family in Germany.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.